What's going on, guys? My name's Sam and welcome back to Prepmedic. In this week's video, we are talking salary. So one of the things that comes up over and over and over again in the comments section is EMS salary, wages. Can you make a living in this profession? Can you not? Do you have to work 8 jobs? And today I want to discuss some of the national statistics on average salaries and then put my own take on it with my own experience. This is kind of a taboo topic because I am going to be talking about what I make. I'm not doing this to brag or to try to one-up anybody, anything like that. But I think it's really important for people coming into this profession, and even some people that are already in this profession, to have an idea of what other people are making and kind of have an idea of if that fits their lifestyle, if that fits their long-term goals for how they want to live, what kind of money they want to make. Because you aren't going to get rich in this, but in my opinion, you can make a pretty solid living in EMS. One other thing I want to mention very quick is that I believe I've been compensated fairly well in my career, but I completely understand that others have not, and there are places that do not pay very well for EMS. So I understand that. I do believe EMS needs a pay bump overall because we are not being compensated for the level of expertise we bring into this field. With all of that being said, let's get into some of the numbers. So let's start with some of the statistics that are found online. And this is a really easy Google search. All you need to do is Google paramedic salary by state or national averages, and you'll find pretty much the same numbers I did. Most of these numbers are pulled from ZipRecruiter and Indeed, so they're not necessarily 100% accurate, but I tried to go with websites that kind of correlated to my experience and what I know of the field and what some of my friends are getting paid in these states. So the first thing we're going to talk about is paramedic salary. So we're dividing paramedic and EMT because they're two completely different certifications and oftentimes two completely different jobs. For those of you that don't know, EMT is kind of an entry-level position. Generally, class goes for about 3 weeks to a semester and is about 150 hours of education, gets up to a basic life support level. Paramedic is usually another 2 years on top of that. That brings you up to a more advanced level. So paramedics are naturally going to get paid a little bit more than EMTs on a national level. So let's start with the paramedic salary. So according to Indeed, the average paramedic salary on a national level is $40,000-ish. These are ish numbers. Now that comes out to be about $19.74 per hour. According to ZipRecruiter, the highest paid state is New York, and the average starting salary is $22.39 per hour, which comes out to be about $46,564 yearly. The lowest paid state is North Carolina, and they start at $15.93 per hour, which comes out to be about $33,128 yearly. So, a couple things we have to talk about there. Even though New York is the highest paid in the nation, keep in mind that the majority of the salaries that are pulled for this site are going to be from New York City, which has an astronomical cost of living. So if you compare that to the lowest paid state, you're actually probably making more in North Carolina because your cost of living is so much lower. That's why these statistics are relatively skewed. Now, I will tell you that when I started my first job at Mary Greeley in Central Iowa, I started at about $17.50 per hour. Now, same with New York, you have to keep in mind cost of living. Central Iowa is a very, very low cost of living. I bought my first house for about $90,000 and it was a decent, nice house. So keep that in mind as we go forward. The other thing that these do not take into account is the amount of overtime you work. So in my EMS career, I have never made less than $60,000 in a year. And that is not an astronomical amount of money, but to me, for having something that is less than a 2-year degree in some areas, that is not a bad living. And you can live relatively comfortably off $60-some thousand a year. That is also overtime, so that will take you away from your family and friends for an extended period of time if you want to make that kind of money. Since moving to Colorado, my pay has gotten bumped up relatively substantially. That being said, the cost of living in Colorado is much higher. So the wage I make now is pretty comparable to what I was making at Mary Greeley when I left. I started here with about 8 years of EMS experience at about $27 an hour, which to me is a very good living, and I'm very comfortable with that salary. Now, I will say that there are other agencies that do not pay that well. So in the world of EMS, you have a couple different levels of EMS that will all pay a little bit different. And this is kind of a sweeping generalization. It's not true everywhere, but in my experiences, it's pretty accurate. So at the top of the pay scale, you're going to have third service EMS organizations. Third service simply means that they are tax-based. They are paid for by a community, completely nonprofit. So everything goes back into the employees and the equipment. Now, below that, you're going to have nonprofit EMS agencies. So that's who I work for, where I'm a hospital-based system. It's a nonprofit hospital-based system. They pay us relatively well, but generally speaking, they're going to be just a little bit less paid than the third service organizations. And then finally, you have the for-profit ambulance agencies. These are agencies like AMR and Falck. These are corporations, essentially, that exist to make money. They're a business model. Therefore, they want to have net profit at the end of the year and are going to pay their employees just a little bit less. In my area, a lot of AMR paramedics are starting out at $15 to $17 an hour, which is pretty low for this area. Now, there are some exceptions. AMR and Falck operate differently depending on what part of the United States they're in or what specific company they're working for. So that pay will go up and down depending where you are. It's not always a bad thing. So let's move on to EMT salaries. And then we're going to kind of circle back and we're going to discuss selecting the right place to work and finding these higher paying agencies because they are out there. So EMTs, the annual average salary for an EMT is $27,000 a year. The highest paid state is New York, starting at an average of $15.83 per hour, which comes out to $32,931 annually. And then the lowest paid state is once again North Carolina, and their average starting is $11.26 per hour, which comes out to $23,429 yearly. This is substantially lower than the paramedic group because it is a lower education standard. I do believe EMTs need to make more money, but in most areas, EMT is not necessarily considered a profession. It's not considered a career, I should say. Now, that's not to give offense to somebody that's made EMT a career. It is a very honorable profession to be in. That being said, a lot of people use it as a stepping stone to paramedic or to PA or to other healthcare jobs. So not a lot of people stay in the EMT realm the entire time. My wife is one good example. She started as an EMT at a small private service, and now she's a doctor. So she just used that to get some experience at the ground level to get into med school. Our EMTs at the agency I work at now are starting at about $15.50 an hour, give or take. Now, these starting numbers will go up with more experience. So if somebody comes in with a couple years of EMT experience, they will be paid more by most agencies. Keep that in mind. Now, in EMS specifically, the hourly wage does not always equal the annual salary. That's because a lot of EMS agencies operate on 48-hour or 24-hour schedules. So a pretty common schedule for EMS providers is a 24-48. So that's where you work 24 hours and then you get 48 hours off. Well, if you march that out on a calendar, most weeks you will get at least 8 hours of overtime, and then some weeks you will get 16 hours of overtime. So if you are making about $15 an hour and you're working a 24-48, your annual salary will be about $50,000 a year. So it is more time away from family. You are working for that extra money. However, the nice thing about that is I work 12-hour shifts. When I get home, my day is completely shot. I go right to bed. Now, I may as well be getting paid for the night and get woken up once or twice and make that extra money. So that's why a lot of people enjoy the 24-48 schedule. That being said, it's really hard on your body, especially if you're at a high call volume agency. So that kind of schedule is not for everybody. Now, the one other variable I'm going to throw into this conversation is firefighter paramedics. So a firefighter paramedic is exactly what it sounds like. It's somebody that's trained as a firefighter, works for a fire department that runs an ambulance. Fire medics are going to make a little bit more in general than EMS alone. Now, this is changing. EMS is going away from a fire-based model in a lot of areas. However, a fire medic's national average salary is about $52,000 a year starting. And in my area, if you go work for South Metro in the South Denver area, they're starting fire medics at about $80,000 to $90,000 a year. So there is good money in this field, but you have to be able to branch and to look for the right place to work. And that goes into the last discussion I want to have, and that's selecting the right place to work. Just because somebody offers you a job doesn't mean you should just take that right away. Shop around and always negotiate your salary. I would always try to find a county or some kind of third service or not-profit ambulance service if you're going to start in EMS. They're going to, in my experience, treat you a little bit better. That's not to say all AMRs and FALCs are bad or negative. However, in my experience, these places will treat you just a little bit better. All right, this all leads me to the final discussion of this video, and that is selecting the right agency to work for. Don't go work for the first agency to give you a job offer. There are a lot of EMS positions out there, and I would highly encourage you shop around in your area and don't be afraid to move. There are some really great EMS agencies out there that will compensate you very well for your time and your education, and they'll treat you well. You won't have to kill yourself with overtime, but you have to shop around. And like I've said in other videos, you have to figure out what is in your area. So everywhere in the US is going to operate a little bit differently. Every city is going to have a different idea of how they run EMS. Some will be fire-based, some will be county-based, some will be private ambulance services. So you have to decide where you want to work and then go and talk to people. Figure out where the good places to work are. If you walk into any EMS building and you start talking with their paramedics and EMTs, they're going to be able to tell you where the places to work are and where to stay away from. And that's great resources to have at your disposal. So I'm probably going to do a live stream next week that goes more in depth on some of these issues that I can answer some of your questions live. I'll let you know when that's coming up. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Once again, this was not meant to make anybody feel bad or to brag about my salary or, air private information just for the sake of doing it. I think it's really important to have a good understanding of what others are making in a field. And I really hate that the only voices about EMS on the internet are oftentimes really burnt out paramedics and EMTs that have nothing positive to say about this profession, because this is a great profession to be in. You can make a living off it. There are some great places to work for, and it's not as bad as some people make it seem. So, like I said, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Be sure you like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next week.